Hey everyone, welcome to the Incubator Podcast. I'm your co-host, Darren Boyd.
And this is Satbir Sran. Again, welcome. Today we're really excited to bring to you an interesting topic around SaaS Security Posture Management, led by one of the leading firms in the marketplace, which is Reco.ai, led by Ofer Klein, who is the co-founder and CEO of the firm. Welcome to the show, Ofer. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. All right, Ofer, if you wouldn't mind, before we dive into SSPM, as we call it, a little bit more about your background and what led you to founding Reco.
Sure. So my personal background, this is not my first startup. I'm a serial entrepreneur, started by flying helicopters in the Israeli Air Force, then startup in the IoT automation space, and then met my two co-founders today, Gal and Tal, and got into this. And my two co-founders, basically 15 years in the Israeli FBI. One of them is AI PhD. Another one was an attacker, still to date, the youngest ever lieutenant colonel in the history of the service. And the problem they faced is very similar to the overlay of what we know now as SaaS security. The data of the bad guys became encrypted on a national level. And basically they created machine learning graph that became an AI graph over the years, that just by analyzing patterns of communication that could effectively understand what, when, and where things are going to happen. National level. They won the Israeli Defense Award by the president. And this was basically the foundation level of our company, which was, can you build a graph that analyzes everything in SaaS in the company in a scalable and real-time way in order to tackle this problem?
Yeah, that's fascinating, and I'm glad you found each other because that's quite a cast. We were just talking off camera before we started, and I was just mentioning we saw this article from the CISO of JP Morgan, and he was saying that he almost characterized three areas that he's really interested in, and one of them was a massive resurgence almost of SaaS proliferation. We are seeing it in every single one of our enterprise customers that there's almost this resurgence of this explosion of SaaS in an environment. It almost feels obvious that we need a solution, but what Reco, I think, provides is a fascinating take on how to almost cull the chaos, provide a measurement of risk, and then have prescriptive ways of mitigating some of that. Can you walk us through a little bit of your genesis story in what you've been building, what you're targeting with that build, and maybe how you're starting to expand into the world with your products?
Sure. So let's start with the customer. What's happening now in SaaS? You saw two very big jumps in SaaS usage. The first one was during COVID. I cannot go to the office anymore. Now I need to use a set of collaboration tools. Then it moved from about 20 apps per company to about 50 to 70. And now the average between our customers is more than 500 apps, which means, do you really know every app you're using? Do you actually understand who is using them? What are they using? And the big jump was obviously due to the Gen AI apps. It's much easier, faster, and cheaper for you to build on top of SaaS than developing it by yourself. Almost every company today is some level SaaS-based, and some of them are even SaaS first, which means the business is very happy to run on SaaS, faster, better, cheaper. And oh my God, now I need to know what's out there. Like you just mentioned, JPMC. First, I need to know what's out there. I need to govern it, and I need to secure it. And one thing I cannot do as a security practitioner, I cannot block the business. And by the way, the big banks, insurance companies, and many others tried for a while, and then you started seeing the shadow SaaS appear. Mm-hmm. I'm a marketing person. I'm going to be amazing in my job, with or without you, Mr. Security Person. I'm going to add new app to my Salesforce. I'm going to add a new Gen AI app to transcript all the calls on Zoom, and I will not tell you because you're going to block it. And only when you start working together, when security will have the tools in order to support the business, now we start seeing an amazing thing that starts to happen.
Absolutely.
And this was the main guidance for us of SSPM by itself is great, but it's not enough because you don't know what the apps are, who is using them, identities, access, obviously configuration and compliance, and also the detection and response. So I'm very proud that today we're the only platform that covers the entire life cycle of SaaS. If you will, this is like the Wiz for SaaS. What Wiz are doing for cloud, copy paste, this is pretty similar to what we're doing for SaaS.
And that's significant too, because to your point, we're seeing folks that are trying to plug into CASB solutions and look at the proxies and do some NLP, but it seems like a lot of vendors have to pick a road, and they're trying to go down that place. What you just articulated, I think, is the true nature of what needs to be solved, and you're tackling all aspects. But that's also very daunting. So, how if you can break down some of those elements for us, because you're right, what we've seen from your platform is truly phenomenal from a risk mitigation, from an access governance perspective, from a compliance perspective, a reporting perspective. You're really covering all the gamut. Can you walk us through how you approach some of that and what some of those constituent parts add up to the whole? What do those even look like, those constituent parts?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We took a very untraditional approach when we started the company. We understood that SaaS is going to grow. To be honest, we couldn't anticipate OpenAI revolution and the Gen AI, etc., which accelerated dramatically. But the thinking was, this is going to get out of control sometime. So if I build it in the traditional way of a security company or any startup, this is going to be a niche solution that is going to be really hard to scale. And you see some of those companies getting bought right now. We said, I don't know if this is going to be huge, but if it's going to be huge, the only way to solve the problem is to do something scalable that is going to be basically scanning throughout everything. So we started by 2.5 years of developing this graph that analyzes every interaction between people, applications, and data in real time. It took a year to build the graph, another 1.5 years to make it scalable and in real time. We have now customers with 750,000 accounts, and it doesn't even reach 20% capacity. Once you have that, now you can start the full life cycle of questions. What are you using? App discovery. You have companies doing only that. How are they using it? Which is configuration management compliance. That's SSPM. Who is using it? Third type of companies, that's identity and access, admins, local accounts, all of those things. And finally, detection and response. If you try to combine all of that together, if you start from SSPM, it's literally impossible. Two different technologies. So once you have this crazy graph, my co-founder Tal is a PhD, we have multiple PhDs, 11 patents. It's a very, very deep and complex graph. Now, as you mentioned, every component is just an add-on. For example, we've built what we call the App Factory that allows us to add a new integration every 2 to 3 days, which means we started the year with about 20. We now have more than 120. We're going to end the year with 150 plus. Wow. So supporting the business with what they need is also velocity plus the depth and the coverage.
No, that's really important, Ofer, because I want to say that maybe you were talking about the COVID era when people was kind of a dramatic shift. So I think the traditional enterprise view at that point was still very much, we have the top 20 or so SaaS platforms out there. We'll really just focus on them. But since then, it's been infinitesimal, if you will, growth or an explosion of growth in terms of that SaaS usage. And coming back to your point of this graph of discovery, I think discovery is so critical to the or is on the minds of security personnel, leaders, in enterprise today. Is I don't know what I don't know, so how do I get to understand, visualize those interactions you're speaking of? Only then can you actually start to determine, okay, what am I going to do about those? What are the controls and the configuration aspect? And then ultimately to get to that ideal state of detection and response. So, in the marketplace, I think you are fundamentally answering this end-to-end view comprehensively, and that is absolutely critical. So how is this now evolving in terms of what Reco is seeing in the marketplace, right, is your ability to transform, as you mentioned, there's folks that do just discovery. There's folks that just do configuration. How is Reco able to really do all of these individual components well end to end?
Yeah, so actually you mentioned something extremely important. We talked to two types of companies mainly, those that already have some sort of solution and looking for displacing them, and those that are basically starting from scratch. Usually the nucleus, the starting point is I need to have CSPM for SaaS. I just learned it's called SSPM. Great. And then our question is discovery. Do you actually know everything? And I don't know if you can say this term on the podcast, but we changed the name from the first risk assessment meeting to the oh shit meeting. How many apps do you think you have, Mr. CISO? 250. No, you have 565. You didn't even know. So the discovery part creates such an oh shit moment saying, I'm not even looking at the right place. I do not have the tools to manage them. Can you help me? And what we're starting to see more and more from financial, insurance, retail, tech companies and more, starting from the discovery, moving to the posture and detection and response. And some of them is exactly as you mentioned, they don't even ask the question because they cannot imagine some crazy company implemented all of that in one tool.
There's something else I want to pick at there, because what we have seen, and I don't know if you've had some of this in your conversations, is this is very daunting to turn around and say you're off by a factor of 2, 3, 4. But it immediately invokes a little bit of, like you said, it's the oh shit moment, but it's immediately followed with, you just made this my problem. But now Reco is going to help you prioritize where to start. Can you walk through, like, what is a practical journey after the oh shit moment? I'm going to panic and I'm going to say, now I'm responsible for coming up with a plan. How do you help enable these organizations to start to get their arms around that degree of chaos?
This is so important because at the early days, we heard from several regulated companies to say, I don't want to know because then I become responsible. Can you? I want to make sure that if you show me, you help me resolve, because otherwise I'm in a worse condition than before. So the answer is yes. This is an extremely important part. We have 3 steps of the implementation plan. The first one is discovery and prioritization. Here is the oh shit moment. Here are all of the things that you need to fix from the initial scan. Now let's prioritize. What's not important right now, let's push for later. And then you start doing the risk mitigation. It could be that your Salesforce configuration allows data to be exposed publicly. It could be MFA that now becomes mandatory in 2025. It could be the number of apps. It could be anything that is important for your company. Then we build it for risk mitigation. And the third step, we create workflows. One of the biggest differentiators between SaaS security and, let's say, firewall or endpoint, it's not only you, Mr. or Mrs. Security practitioner. Because if I'm the app owner of Salesforce and you're a security practitioner, you cannot block me. I'm the business owner that is in charge of the business part of the system, and you're in charge of the security part. We need to work together in basically shared responsibility. And it sounds funny, but it's something that we worked on more than a year to create a safe haven, most from the psychology perspective than the technology. Because if you talk to me in 0101 and I'm talking to you in $signs, we will never understand each other. How can you create this safe haven with a common language to solve these problems together?
Yeah, that's wow. I'm glad you look at the problem that way, because I think that's fascinating. Oftentimes, like, we recognize that most of what we deal with is a socio-technical problem. We have to bring people together, and like you said, we sometimes need a common rubric. Ofer, do you have any interesting use cases that can kind of tie some of this together, going from that oh shit moment all the way to building a prescriptive plan that somebody could actually action and then come back and measure some of those results? Do you have something you can maybe walk us through just to highlight some of this in action?
Sure. So let me give you a few examples from each of those modules. The first one, let's take app discovery in Shadow SaaS. In a public company, we found obviously hundreds of apps they didn't know about. We went through the process of, you can filter, for example, show me all my AI apps, all my sales apps, etc. And then we created a process that this team basically worked with the business owners to say, hey, you have 55 apps. If you don't remove those apps that I don't allow within 24 hours, I'm going to start blocking them. They removed more than 200 apps within 2.5 weeks, saving money, consolidating technology, raising awareness, and basically creating this workflow. So that's one example from the app discovery in Shadow SaaS. Another example from, let's say, from the data exposure. A very big law firm they had millions of files exposed to all employees. You can say, so much. Oh, oops. And they had Copilot. Within 5 seconds, I can find everything, all of the agreements, employee salaries, all of the fun stuff. So we created a process. In this case, it was automated to approach the people. This is exposed, et cetera, and by a few days, the data that was exposed was reduced dramatically by 95%. Marketing files stayed open, and everything else was basically removed. Another example from the Access. This is another public company. This is from the financial space. Someone accessed Salesforce. Is that good or bad? I don't know. Tell me more. Former contractor that stayed basically admin, did not work for them for 6 months, worked for the competitor. He know they're tracking download and basically snooped on data. Open, close, open, close, open, close. So those kind of things of former employees, in that case, it was extremely sensitive information. That's another example.
Yeah. Really compelling when you get all of these insights and bring it all together. Going back to what you said earlier, Ofer, is you're enabling that kind of socio-technical dynamic where the business can have conversations with security. How is that unfolding? Because I get it. If it's Salesforce, great, major business platform and everything like that. But for the shadow apps out there for the enterprise, which is probably it's proliferated, like I said, like wildfire. You're now aware of it. So how is the organization enabling productivity to continue in this kind of post-COVID world where individuals have their own tools, Gen AI, all of those things? So what's the view or the conversation that Reco's enabling the business, I wouldn't even call it the business at this point, it's just the general employee base and security to have where productivity is not implemented, but yet is governed through Reco?
Yeah. Actually, you mentioned a great point, which is how to the business continuity, basically, the business side. We see less and less companies that say, I decide I'm just going to block them and I don't care about the business. We heard it like 2 years ago. You hardly hear that again because they understand this is the business side. You cannot block it. Once you get this position, there are two main options that we see. One of them regarding the business unit. Another one is by region. And the most important thing is to get enough information. I'll give you an example. There was an app, in this case, it's an insurance company that only had 10 users. So, great, remove. CEO, COO, CIO, all of the C-level, good luck. 5 minutes later, they got a phone call to say, please connect it again. So the business impact is extremely important in your process. Once you understand what is the app, what is it used for, what is the risk level, aka permissions, who are the users, now you have this amazing word called context. And we help those teams take context-based decisions and then context-based workflows as well.
Mm-hmm. Can you expand a little bit on the context? Because when I think about risk, I'm thinking about several dynamics. One of them being the regulated industry I operate in. There's going to be various, like we have global operators that are in multiple theaters throughout the world, and they could have 20, 30 different regulatory bodies they're responsible for, or at least regulations that they have to be mindful of. Is that one of the tenets that you would look toward, is complying with this particular framework, and here's the decisions we've made from that, or the deficiencies we've identified, and then we add? What does that context look like, I guess, in reality?
So again, I wish it was one size fits all. You see different between Europe and the US, and difference between different type of companies. Tech are more open, insurance and finance and banks are more closed, obviously by definition. So if I give you like the common ground there is you have compliance that we map, again, continuous compliance and all that. You have what is allowed, what is not allowed. In a multinational companies, a lot of times it's by region. It's allowed in Switzerland, it's not allowed in Brazil, or vice versa. Okay? So then now you have to be granular enough and the tool to be easy enough to use for them to take decisions per level of granularity. It could be business unit, could be region, It could be daughter company because I have 55 companies that are daughter companies. And because I don't know how your business is operating, we have created this granularity and flexibility, creating new compliance, creating new check, new detection and response rule takes between 5 to 10 minutes.
Well, I'll jump in here. Ofer, one major thing, look, you said it, context is paramount, context is king to everything, right? And so you have, if you will, the security and engineering aspect of organizations thinking through all of this and establishing that business partnership as we've just talked about. Then comes like the taking the action part, right? I'll call it the operational aspect of things. Now with Reco and this insight that's gathered, the context that's enabled, what can an organization or a team expect as to, I'll call it the operational burden of, I'll call it just getting SaaS under control, right? Because sometimes it's, hear no evil, see no evil type of thing. It's out there. I'm just going to ignore it for now because I can't handle the problem. I can't take action on it. How does Reco actually, like I said, your platform is very powerful, gives you the context and everything like that. But how does it truly impact the operational ability or burden for security teams to take that action and get things or actually reduce risk without feeling I need 10 more headcount, so to speak?
Yeah. So we're very proud of the stat that we are saving time instead of getting more time from your team. The time that we measured across our customers right now is about 80% less effort than any other tool in the market. And let me give you a few examples. We heard a lot of times we start the implementation plan and say, okay, let's contact the admin of or the app owner of Salesforce. Oh, I don't even know who this person is. Okay, great. And then never mind. Then maybe ServiceNow. Oh yeah, I never talked to them ever before. So we create this in the platform. So it's really easy to communicate with the business. It's really easy to basically group. These are all of the admins from sales, from marketing, from other groups. So the operational side becomes much easier. Then the next step, I opened the ticket. I have no clue what they've done with it. Once you close the loop with the ticketing, with the communication, with even SIEM and automation, now I just need to decide what is important for me. And I have this tool called Reco connected to my other systems that will help me operationalize it. The interesting part, and you'll be amazed how little amount of skill each security person have across everything SaaS, because it's impossible. Right. So if I'm just expert on security and you help me with everything else, that's the easiest way to operationalize it. And again, across all of our customers, we did not find even one case so far that they needed to add headcount. And we had many other cases when they did manual stuff and we saved thousands of hours automating it.
That's really great that you put everything the way you just did, Ofer, because in many cases, that's a hesitation that folks have because they feel that, I'll call it that the SaaS security space hasn't matured. They weren't even able to get their original platforms to succeed because it took a tremendous amount of burden, just as you've described, to configure, get things ready, and chase down all the stakeholders involved. And now you only have coverage maybe on a handful of SaaS platforms out there versus, and meanwhile, you're ignoring the 2,000 or so or 500, whatever it is out there that's shadow. So this is tremendously important. It goes back to your value proposition of the entire end-to-end platform, beginning with discovery and that ease of discovery and visualization with context and everything like that, not adding that additional burden on security team is tremendously powerful.
Yeah. I do want to ask one question. It's almost like I guess it's a connected question, which is from where you sit, Ofer, there's one question I would have is, where do you see it? What do you see happening in terms of trends, right? And it's probably going to be a lot around AI, but you may have other insights into some of the trends. And then can you couple that with what advice do you give people? Because there's almost like I want to turn around and say, hey, the best time to start is going to be right now, right? I think that's going to be an obvious one. But based on some of your insights and maybe some of the trends, it may elevate that urgency. So can you kind of connect? What do you see out there? Where do you see it going? And what advice can you offer people to help them understand and get started. How would you couple those two?
Yeah, so on the business side, you see trends in SaaS in general. The number of apps, you cannot ignore it anymore. It's here to stay. It's here to grow significantly. Obviously, AI, LLM, all of those add a different level of complexity. And you start seeing like AI governance team and those kind of things. From the security side, we started seeing a very interesting trend of consolidation. Obviously, you consolidate as much as you can, but consolidating on something that you didn't know you can consolidate, like SaaS security, discovery, and all of those things, we do see a lot of companies that once it's being introduced, it really helped them sell it internally. And the average number of teams across the company right now, across the tool, is 3.5. So between 3 to 4 teams from each company. And therefore, it's easier for us to train the team and to operationalize. I don't have enough people. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough skill. So one tool is much easier than 3 or 4 tools.
Yeah, I'm gonna put an exclamation point on some of this. We spent some time in the data security space, and it's we can fingerprint data, we can do all sorts of things with data. However, now that we're generating new content, a lot of these tools are able to look, observe, and then start to generate unique content that I may not be as effective at fingerprinting. So being able to find what these tools are, where they are, who's operating them, under what conditions, et cetera, I think is an imperative everybody should be paying attention to, because like fingerprinting the data itself may not be enough. It won't be enough. And there are so many of these tools that are a new attack surface that people really need to pay attention to. So I appreciate that.
Totally. Actually, 2 days ago, you saw like a new breach was introduced, that someone created a sophisticated API on top of DocuSign that you connect an app to app and getting in front of all of your documents. You find it in Snowflake. Snowflake was never breached. It was the usage on top of it, exactly as you mentioned. And this is extremely hard to do in scaling so many people, so many apps, and different uses, types of usage.
For maybe one last question here, and maybe going down a little bit back in our conversation. When we talked about discovery, you mentioned that there's certain maybe platforms out there that just focus on discovery of SaaS applications, and maybe they take an identity-specific approach, right? How is Reco different when we talk about discovery? And I get the total aspect of the configuration and posture and detection and response, but if we just say maybe that these other platforms out there say the value, if you just do discovery and identity, well, that's enough. How should one look at that kind of statement and saying we do this better, bar none, so versus the complete end-to-end platforms?
So we have several customers that started with the discovery part, with the shadow SaaS part, and then expanded over time. And you can compare it to several different types of tools. Obviously, I won't mention specific vendors. One of them is, the discovery based on the network traffic, the SASE. You have the CASBs of the world, and then you have other types of shadow SaaS. One of the most important things is the level of false positive and accuracy. Because the SASE, if I log into a website, how do you know this is a SaaS app or not? That's number one. How do you know what is this SaaS app and what are the basically configurations, etc.? So we are very proud that, one of those elements, and this is how we won several of those tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of employees, is by, we have an AI engine, or an engine scanning 50,000 apps. He knows categorizing them, AI, sales, marketing, etc. We know how to differentiate between thank you for registering to OpenAI versus would you like to buy OpenAI. So all of those things aggregate into one word, which is accuracy and less false positive. If I know that what you show me is accurate, now I can drill down further. And as you mentioned, the second level is the identity. Because identity is a lot to do with the business impact. 70% of living employees in the US take some sort of data. I'm not stealing, I just want to be better in my next company, so I'm just going to take all of the accounts name. And you shouldn't do that. So living employees, former employees, new employees, local accounts, all of those identification metrics, VIPs. Attackers really like to attack VIPs. Do they use the product or not? So all of those come together into this, again, context of discovering, accuracy, identity, and pulling everything together.
Awesome. All right. Well, Ofer, this has been a very enlightening conversation. I want to thank you for your time. Any parting thoughts from yourself on what's next for Reco as you continue to grow and expand?
Yeah, so we are very excited about the market. Sometimes you can have an amazing product, amazing technology, but the market doesn't happen. So you find it from so many directions right now. SaaS is exploding. The evil guys see it. They started breaching it. SaaS security now is growing faster than ever. And we are really excited about the fact that, the customers actually understand the value of consolidating that into one platform. And, this is why we're so excited about the day-to-day and the future as well.
Well, we certainly appreciate you being here, your time, your team is amazing, and the partnership. So we appreciate you coming on, and we look forward to continuing the partnership.
Same here. Thank you so much.